As I work on the more lengthy tutorials in the Fundamental Modeling series, I want to start a subset of videos that covers just the tools and specific modeling operations, because there's a lot of hidden functionality in Hexagon that I may not get to when doing the other tutorials. In this video, I'm going to cover Symmetry Mode and the Symmetry tool. I talked about Manual Symmetry in my low poly modeling tutorial. It's about manually selecting two opposite sides and shaping the object with the manipulators. That's one way to make symmetrical objects, but there's a tool for this. With the shape selected, you can activate and deactivate symmetry anytime using this button. What that does is put the object in symmetry mode and displays a symmetry plane across the middle of the shape. The green line indicates the dividing line. Whatever I manipulate on this side, the other side gets the same treatment. If your object has symmetry in more than one direction, you can change the plane and alter the shape in that direction. You can choose a symmetry plane along the X, Y, or Z axes using these buttons. However, the more you do this, the more likely your shape loses its symmetry. It's on you to watch this, as it's possible to break the symmetry connection by unintentionally creating asymmetrical edits. Any vertex that still has its symmetry maintains the connection with the other side. Once the shape loses all of its symmetry, you'll need to divide and apply a mirrored side manually. I'll explain this more later. Generally, you want to stick to one symmetry plane as you model. You can deactivate symmetry mode at any time pressing the same button. Another way to manage symmetry on various planes is to combine it with the manual symmetry editing method. That is, selecting opposite sides manually and making changes while the symmetry mimics those alterations on the other side. With practice, you'll learn how to mix symmetry planes without breaking the actual symmetry. Of course, that has limitations too. Like here, I need to make an edit that I can't make while in symmetry mode, and doing that breaks the symmetry. When that happens, there's a bit of tolerance for those areas that are still symmetrical. It's important to recognize when your symmetry breaks because Hexagon won't notify you of it. You just need to be observant and watch that you don't make a change that would cause the shape to become asymmetrical. Generally, I leave symmetry mode on until I need to make heavy edits to just one side. Ultimately, if you break the symmetry, you can always fix it later. Sometimes what I like to do is work on individual parts in symmetry mode. For instance, I might model a nose for a character this way. I'll work on parts like this first and then attach it to the body. That method allows me to work on individual parts using all the tools at my disposal without worrying about the topology of the whole model. Here, I can use the tweak tool, first putting it into point selection mode, then activating it pressing the Tab key. When working in this mode, it's important not to activate smoothing or any other operation because you need to validate the tweaking changes. In tweak mode, I can shift the points around in a free-form fashion, and as I do that, the same changes are implemented on the reverse side. When I'm happy with the edits, I validate it by pressing return. When in symmetry mode, most of the usual tools function as you would expect. All of the selection tools work as you would expect. The fast extrude tool works. Beveling works great. Splitting rings works. The free cut tool works. The fill tool works. Poly Pen tool works. The tri, quad, and diamond tessellation works, so all capping in symmetry mode isn't a problem. Bridging works, however, you can't bridge across the symmetry. Here's what you can't do in symmetry mode. The slice around tool doesn't work, and when you try, a message appears. The symmetry plane turns red, indicating it's unsupported. Oddly enough, I can't use Command X to cut out a polygon. Instead, I need to use the delete key. If you don't have that on your keyboard, you can find it under Edit. I can't slide edges, see? It looks like it's going to work, but it doesn't. I hope that gets fixed someday. The extract along edge doesn't work too. Same goes for the same operation done with the edge tools. There's probably a lot more I can and can't do with symmetry mode, but those are the big things I can think of. Generally, I stay away from using any dynamic operations when in symmetry mode. However, you can experiment and see what works. When an object is mostly asymmetrical, symmetry won't even activate. See, it's just not an option. So, what is needed now is to divide and create the symmetry using the symmetry tool, or I like to call it the mirror tool to distinguish it from symmetry mode. I've talked about this tool before in other tutorials, but let's dive deeper into it to study its features. Here, I have this character's head, and sorry if this gives you nightmares, it's completely asymmetrical. That's because at some point I was working symmetrically, but then stopped to add the ear and the nose to the head. So, to make it symmetrical again, first I need to place a dividing line down the middle. It can be temporary just for the operation. I'll use the ring selection, Alt-R, and split the ring pressing Shift-X. Now I'll select a surface loop on this side, pressing Alt-E, and press Command X. Now that I have separate islands of surfaces, I can select this side and grow the selection, pressing the plus key, and then delete this half. Before I add symmetry, I need to check how flat this edge is. I'll loop select this and check it. If I snap to orthographic, I can see it's not very flat at all. Looking at the size along the x-axis, it needs to read 0.0 to be flat. I'll type that here and press return, and now it's flat. Now for the symmetry part. With the shape selected, I press Command-Shift-Alt-N. That activates the symmetry tool. I could select this side or press this X plus button here. I know that's the one to use by looking down here to see the direction I want it to go. That copies it to the other side, but I still have some options here. Right now, the clone option is off. A clone is a feature that creates an instance of an object. So whatever changes I make to one side gets reflected to the other side. So in this case, that's what I want. I turn the clone on and press accept or press return. Now, when I use the tweak tool, whatever change I make on this side, it's also made on the opposite side. One important thing to note about the clone option, this side is absolutely separate from the other side. When I'm finished making my edits, I need to combine them. And after they are combined, it's symmetrical again, so I could go back to using symmetry mode to make any editing. Anyway, if I look at the scene tree, I see this little C icon. That tells me it's an instance of the source object. Think of it as a functional duplicate. Whenever the source changes, the clone emulates that change. As a side note, you can make a clone of anything without symmetry by pressing Command D. I can break the clone connection by pressing on that icon. Another important thing about working on symmetrical models is that you want to have the dividing line at the center of the world. It's not required, but doing that allows you to place objects precisely on the opposite sides. For instance, I want to copy the shape for this eye to fit into the socket on the other side, precisely. So first, I would select all the shapes I want to center. The division falls along the x-axis, so that's the one that needs to be at the center world position. I make sure that I have absolute, not relative, selected here. And under position, I type 0 and press accept. And the object's moved out of view, so I'll press a Shift 1 to go to it. When I select the eye now, I make note of its position. Sadly, I can't copy and paste the number, and I hope that changes one day, but right now it's at minus 3.278. So let's copy that and place it at a positive 3.278. Now the eye is duplicated precisely and it appears on the opposite side. When I've done all the edits, I combine the source and clone by pressing Command-Shift-C with the Weld tool. Then I subdivide and test to see in fact that it's welded without defects. If I didn't like that dividing line right down the center of my object, I could loop select it and dissolve it. Another way to combine a symmetrical object is to use the average weld tool. It works like the weld, but it doesn't rely on you to flatten the side first. That is handy on a complex model that may not have a connecting loop all the way down the division. Let's try it. First I'll mirror it, and pressing Command-Shift-Alt-N and click to select this side. That leaves a gap because I didn't flatten it. So no problem, I'll just nudge it inward. Now, before I can use the average weld tool, I need to combine these objects. So I'll select them both and press Command-Shift-C to weld them. It's one shape now, but the vertices are still separate, and I can see that clearly when I look closely. Now it's time to use the average weld tool to fix that. I only want these points to be affected, so I'll control select them this way. Then I press Command-Shift-Alt-M. Now what it's going to do is find the average between each point and combine them when it makes the connection. I need to slowly adjust the average distance until I see them coming together. I have to be careful because if I push the distance too far, other polygons merge where I don't want them to, and that's because they have similar distances. I'll bring that number back down and press accept or press return. When working on larger models, it's common that you'll need to swap parts from one side to the next. One feature of the Symmetry tool is the ability to choose the dividing plane position. When I select the object and activate the Symmetry tool, there is this button here for choosing the center of the symmetry. When that's active, I get this sort of interface that allows me to position the dividing plane where I want it. If I press the space bar, that changes the axis direction. And most useful, when I hold the shift, it snaps, allowing me to find the center of the object, like this. And when I click, the object is mirrored to the other side. That's great because I can easily position symmetrical parts from one side to the other precisely. For instance, when working on a more complex model like this car, after modeling the tires on one side, I want to create duplicates on the other side. When I select this piece, I can see that the center line accurately depicts the center of the car. I can select the tire on this side and activate the Symmetry tool pressing Command-Shift-Option-N. Then press this button and hold the Shift and locate the center line and click to place. A mirrored copy of the tire is made on the other side in the correct position. It's a quick, painless way of making parts from one side to the other. The same can be done for the mirrors, the seats, the disc brakes, any part that is separated and is symmetrical. Symmetry isn't limited to two sides. You can also use it to make four-sided symmetrical objects too. To do that, you use the following method. First, you make a cube with one tessellation. Then, cut out one side and delete the rest. I think you know where this is going. Now, using the Symmetry tool, add symmetry to each side to form a cube. So now I have a four-sided symmetrical shape, and I can use this to make just about anything from a sci-fi box to a building or any object that has four edges, and there are a lot. When using this method, you have to watch out for using some tools like along outer edges where the division is. For instance, if I use extrude, it creates coplanar polygons. That is, two faces that share the same space absolutely side by side. This object looks normal, but extrude creates faces on all sides. Because this is a clone, the sides I'm concerned with are in the inside of this shape. When I press T for transparency, I can see the faces inside the shape. To see the problem better and fix it, I need to hide the surfaces to look inside. I'll select these surfaces and press here to hide the surfaces. Now I can see the faces on the inside of the object. And since this is a clone, it hides the faces on the other side as well. The faces on the inside can cause modeling and rendering problems, and it's best to remove them. I'll show you what I mean. I'll duplicate these and collapse the clone, then combine the two. When I look inside, there are non-manifold faces that should be removed. Non-manifold means three or more faces share the same edge as seen here. If I don't remove them, it prevents me from doing some modeling operations around it. And it's hard to see, but they also are coplanar faces, meaning two faces share the same exact space. If they were exposed on the outside, it would be bad because it could cause flickering in my rendering. These faces aren't serving a purpose in my model, so I'll delete them. I'll delete one by one so I can show you what happened. With those deleted, now I can apply the usual modeling operations. Here I'll use the Symmetry tool with all 8 sides of this cube. It's useful for making a modern lampshade or a low poly flower or something like that. Using the same methods as mentioned, you can create radial symmetry by dividing a cylinder. To make a true radial symmetrical shape, I use the Copy on Path tool. That will take a slice and make an array on a circular path. To do that, I use this method. I make a cylinder with 64 sides. It could be any amount actually, but I like to make them to the power of 2. So 8, 16, 32, and 64 sides. It's easier to divide that way should I need to. Okay, so let's say I want to make something like a bike tire. I want to start with higher detail in that case, so 64 sides is best. I cap the cylinder on both sides, pressing Shift K. Then I loop one side, copy and paste it down to make the spline line. This will be the support line. Then I extract one slice out of the cylinder using copy and paste, and then delete the rest. Now, with the slice selected, I press Command-Shift-Alt-Y for the Copy on Path tool. It's waiting for me to select a target path, so I click on the spline, and I'm presented with these options here. These numbers along the top let you change how the shape is repeated. I'm going to choose the one that looks best. Then, I want to make sure I have the clone on so that I can repeat any changes made. So right now, there's a gap between each slice because it's repeating along the slice's bounding box. I need to change that center point using this tool. When you click on that, it wants you to choose a new center point. I press that, and I can't really see what I'm doing, so I'll place the center point here temporarily. Okay, now that I can see my slice more clearly, I'll press this again and place the center point on this corner instead, holding Shift to snap to it. It aligns them side by side just as I need it. I'm happy with this, so I'll press Return to validate it and complete it. Now with that done, I can pull the source clone away and work on it to make the shape of the tire and the tread. Okay, something like that. This is just for example. You can get as detailed as you want, but it might be harder to weld the shapes together afterward. So when I'm ready to combine the shapes, I'll remove the clone from the source, pressing the C icon in the object tree. This group is still cloned. I'll select the clone group and press Command-Shift-D to unclone it. OK, I select the group again and press Command-Shift-C to weld. There's a button here for welding while keeping the ray intact, but on a shape like this, it could take a long time to compute, so I don't want that. Okay, so I press Accept and wait for it to compute. And I'll hide the line and slice as I no longer need them. When I subdivide, there are several vertices that aren't connecting. I need to use the Average Weld tool to fix that. So, I remove the subdivision, and also I'll remove the caps. OK, switch to point selection mode, and press Command-Shift-Alt-M for the average weld operation. I tap once on the arrow to widen the average reach. I can see that's connecting now, so I press Accept. Now I'll subdivide to see if there are any remaining defects. It looks good. So that's an introduction to the symmetry tools in Hexagon. Thanks for watching, and please like and subscribe if you don't want to miss out on more modeling tips. There's a lot more coming soon. Thanks.